Welcome to another GTHL preview show. Thomas West alongside Liam Crothers. Today we're going to be looking at the Mississauga Rebels, a team that was able to make it into the playoffs and ended up having a pretty successful regular season.
Yeah, and I think you can credit that to some of the key players on this team, both forward and defensive, that we'll look at a little bit as we get deeper into the show.
As we flip things over right now, we'll take a look at the team. The lines to start things out. Brock Cummings was a highlight on that top line. Jaeger Watson as well. These were two guys that were right up there in the scoring department and some strong forwards.
Yeah, and Benjamin Poitras as well up there on the front line. And as we move back towards the defensive side of things, Castante and Milne, I thought both played well. Sauder was a nice addition to their defensive core as well. And then in net, we had Singh and Morvan. And I mean, top to bottom, they had a lot of different contributors on this team. They didn't get all of their points from one source. And I think that's important for a team that wants to push into the playoffs. You need that versatility in scoring.
Yeah, a guy who was pretty good, William Doherty, a guy who improved a lot from the beginning of the season. He wasn't the strongest player at the beginning, but a guy who really started to step up and help this team work their way into the standings.
Yeah, and it's impressive to see that level of adjustment from a young player. As the season goes on, you get more comfortable in the role that you're going to be playing. And the game that we saw him play, which is up on our YouTube channel, we see him score. And I mean, I think that's a testament to the leaps and bounds that he made in terms of progress during the regular season.
All right, let's take a look at the standings right now. A team that was able to make the playoffs and playing the 2 seed obviously was a difficult matchup in the first round.
Yeah, and it's never the easiest thing to go up against the Marlies in the postseason. And, you know, to the Rebels' credit, they fared well, but the season didn't end the way that they would have liked, didn't put together a very deep playoff push, but a playoff push nonetheless.
Okay, well, let's get into some projections now. We've got a chance to look at these players a little bit, and we want to give you a sense of where we think they're going to be going in terms of the upcoming OHL draft. Now, this isn't going to be a team that has a ton of top-end talent, but there are some draft picks that could be picked out of this team in the 4th to 7th round.
Yeah, and as I had mentioned, they got their contributions offensively from a couple different sources. We started rounds 4 to 7. I've got Watson, Cummings, and Milne from there. Castante, Poitras, Ciarallo, and Sauder, and then 13 to 15 stacked with talent. And I mean, you know, that's where the scouts' jobs get difficult, is when you have a lot of density between rounds 8 to 15. Those are the picks that you need to hit on in those late rounds. They might be a bit more of a project than some of the players that you'll see going rounds 1 to 3, but I think that if you work on those kids and you can develop the raw talent that they already possess, I think they can turn into some very solid players.
Yeah, Jaeger Watson as well, a bright spot, playing on that second line. A lot of the scoring came through him.
Yeah, and I think you can look at the shot that he possesses and you realize that that's where some of that comes from. He's a strong kid. He gets down low on the stick. He creates a lot of torque. In the game that we see, he rifles one past the goaltender. The goaltender gets to it, but I mean, the puck pushes its way all the way through and into the back of the net. It's a testament to how much power the kid possesses in his wrists and in his lower body to generate that much movement.
We both have our projections. I have mine as well. They look relatively similar. I think Cummins and Watson both have some potential getting drafted in the 4th to 7th round. Castante, Milne, Poitras, Doherty, and Catinella. These are some guys I think that do have some value 8 to 12. And as we said, this team doesn't have a ton of draft picks that are going to go very high in the draft. But sometimes these are the teams that you look for to get a pick that's could be a diamond in the rough.
Yeah, and the nature of the OHL draft dictates that the teams that finish in the upper echelon, those top 6 spots, tend to have more players drafted from those spots than teams that we see in the spot that the Rebels are at. But like I said earlier, it's about the scouts doing their due diligence. There are a lot of players here that do have potential to be successful at the next level. It's just a question of finding them. And I think that there are more than a few players on this team. I mean, we saw it in the regular season. We saw it with their own point production. There are players here that are good hits when you get into those later rounds and you're looking to take somebody. And I mean, maybe at that point you get a little bit adventurous. You take a player that not everyone has scouted fully or you haven't seen play entirely as deep in a season as you'd like. But I do think that there's some talent here, and hopefully we see that shine in the next coming years.
Yeah, and we're going to try and find some of that talent as well, as we both have a featured player who we don't think is particularly going on a top round, but could create some value later on in the draft. Brock Cummings, a guy, he has a great playmaker, a guy with a scoring touch. He brings a good frame as well. This is a guy who's not the smallest player. He has some speed. He has some scoring ability. In fact, he was one of the top goal scorers in points and assists this year for his team. This is someone who you should keep your eye on for the upcoming draft.
I think so, and the Mississauga Rebels, they had, as I said, they had a diversity of scoring when it came to it, but Brock Cummings led the way, and that not only speaks to the ability he has on the ice, but also in the locker room. That's a leadership presence that's always important at the next level, because if you can lead by example by putting the puck into the back of the net, it's likely that your teammates are going to rally around that.
Yeah, and another pick as well, a guy that you picked up on that may have some value.
Yeah, I'm with the defenseman Zain Milne here. He's a very hardworking player, and I mean, he can contribute in all situations. We saw him deployed in a variety of scenarios. He had 6 goals and 9 assists with a +8 rating through both the regular season and tournament games that the Mississauga Rebels played. And that means that he led his team in terms of defensive scoring. And I think it's always interesting to see what kind of offense that those players on the back end can bring to their team. And as I mentioned, the scoring was diverse, and Milne was a part of that. It wasn't just Cummings on the front end, it was Milne as well. In supporting the defensive role that he played. And it's not just about point production for those guys, it's also about stability. And I think that plus-minus rating that we pointed out does indicate that on the ice he's very solid, doesn't make many mistakes.
Yeah, and that is something that we've highlighted in both of our players, both Cummings and Milne. These are guys who are very consistent. I believe that's something that could be an attribute at the OHL level, because in drafting in the later rounds, if you know what you're getting, that's going to be a really big boost for your team.
Well, and it's a peace of mind because it's less of a risk for an OHL team to be picking a player that, day in and day out is going to give the same level of compete and the same level of consistency every time. That's a big weight off of their shoulders, and it's something that they don't have to think about. Is this kid going to show up the same way that he played during the regular season every game? Is he going to be there at practice putting in the same effort? With the players here that we've highlighted, that's going to be what you get.
In the GTHL, your team can look very different year to year. No different from most of the teams that we've previewed so far. And for this team, there is a lot of player movement. We take a look at some of the players that are going to be moving away from this team. It's going to be a wholesale change next year for them.
14 players moving on from this Rebels team. I mean, it's incredible to see where they're going and where they're going to be ending up. Ciarallo, Cummings, and Costante we're all going to be moving to the Toronto Nationals. It's interesting to see when teammates decide to move in the same direction. Oscar Kwok, who I thought we were impressed with, currently unsigned, although I do think he has talent, or would have had talent to play in the 2020-2021 season. Dylan Bly in there as well. Jaeger Watson moving to the Titans. He and Fiore, again, a situation where teammates originally on this Rebels team would have been joining forces again on a different squad, and it would have been interesting to see the impact that they would have had. And I mean, it's just a shame that we had lost the season that we did, because with so much player movement and different opportunities for players to get exposure to those scouts, it would have been really fun to watch these kids come into age, right? And it's another year of development. That's so crucial when kids are at this age, because you never know what kind of forward progression a player can make given time and the right attention. It's just a shame that we didn't get to see any of those transactions fully play out the way that we hoped they would.
Yeah, and it's hard to say exactly who is going to be replacing who on this team, because the entire team is going to look absolutely different coming to the next year. But some of the guys that they're going to bring in and, fill out this roster.
Yeah, and they would have been doing it from a couple of different places. You see the Mississauga Sens make a couple of appearances on this list. Epstein, Benayon, Robson, Feo, Rabinski, and Carlsley would have all been coming over from there. The North York Rangers, it would have been Tierman and Ionta joining this team. We see some players from outside of the GTHL. We see the Richmond Hill Coyotes make an appearance with Jack Rimmer. We've got Akimov as well. I mean, there's a ton of different players here. Antonino Rizzo from the Toronto Junior Canadiens that we saw. He played very solid in net. Joshua Liu for the Toronto Red Wings, I thought, played well defensively. Patrick Kanoff from the Reps. There was a ton of different players coming into this team. And it's a shame that, again, we didn't get to see them play out to their full potential, because, I mean, we saw what the Rebels were able to do in the previous season, in the regular season, and their playoff push didn't end as they had hoped. But this would have been a ton of new additions. This would have been a ton of different talent that might have filled some gaps that they were missing. The scoring diversity might have been amplified there as well. And they got another solid goaltender in Antonino Rizzo, who we saw split time with Josh Branton on our YouTube channel with all the games that we saw them play. And I mean, it's really just a shame. But that's not to detract from the upcoming OHL draft, where I do think a lot of these players are going to have the opportunity to show off their talents with whatever OHL team is fortunate enough to pick them.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting as well. Antonino Rizzo was going to get a chance to get probably a secure starting role on that team, as many other players would be battling for as well. That does it for us on the GTHL team preview show. Thomas West Liam Crothers. We'll see you next time.